welcome to Saneauto. Let's go up to the barn garage and see what Victor's into today.
Saneauto produces DIY auto repair videos and tool reviews. Hosted by retired ASE certified master mechanic Victor Sane.
And he's a cutie pie too.
Let's dive right into replacing the hub bearing on a 2010 Toyota Prius. We get to play with power tools. A few important things to prepare. Of course, lots of parts. Jack. Safety stand. Wheel chocks. Even though I am on a level surface, still wheel chocks. I've topped off the brake fluid. Right here is the top level of maximum full, and it's above that because we're going to use up some brake fluid during this operation. Pay no attention to the brand. The brand does not matter. Dot 3 is what matters. And dot 3 is on the cap. But dot 3, dot 4, dot 5.1 are glycol-based brake fluids. And dot 5 is a silicone-based brake fluid. Never mix silicone-based brake fluids and glycol-based brake fluids. Always look at the cap and see if you can find out what the original equipment fluid is. That way you don't have to remember any of that crap that I just told you. This is off of Amazon, an Aries flip socket set. The Matco flip socket set that I used for like 20 years in the shop. It only came with 2 flip sockets, and employees made off with one of them. And when I bought these over a year ago, I thought, well, I'll get them and see how long they last. And it's been like a year and a half now, and they just haven't broken yet. There's nothing wrong with them. I'm just going to keep on using them. And until something happens. Oh, I might want to put the gun on something other than low. There. Put it on 3. Let's see how that does. That's more like it. And if you're wondering about battery life on this Milwaukee and stuff, let's take it loose here so you can see that light's shining. It has a button here you can press. You can see it's still got 3 divots, and it's been well over a month. Several jobs I've lost count, and it's been sitting out here in the cold. There's really no sense, even if you're doing a lot of jobs, getting like the big 12 amp hour battery, because this is like a 5 amp hour battery. Now, keep in mind, it is the red lithium, which is a better battery than the regular 5 amp hour battery. But even the regular 5 amp hour battery that I have, they do so many jobs with just this one battery. It's just, you really don't need any more unless you're going to be traveling to different states and stuff. You're going to be way out in the woods. I don't know why you would be way away from any way of charging. I just can't think of any situation where you would need more than 5 amp hour battery. Plus, if you had 2 5 amp hour batteries instead of one big 12, then you just swap them out. Okay, you see the parking brake arm here? The cable pulls it forward and applies the pads without the hydraulics. It does it mechanically instead of hydraulically to pin the rotor so that you have a parking brake. In order to test these parking brakes, what I did was I put the vehicle, while it was still on the ground, everything's together, I put the vehicle in drive and pulled up on the parking brake, gave it a tiny bit of throttle, and felt the back end squat because, of course, the front wheels were trying to pull the car forward while the back wheels were trying to stop it. That let me know that the parking brake was still working, which means the caliper was still working and the brake cable is still working. That way I knew that I didn't have to order brake cable or caliper for this job. Now this bolt is 14 millimeter, but you see a 17 millimeter wrench here. And the reason that's there is because I need the special thin 17 millimeter. This just happens to be a snap-on. It doesn't have to be a snap-on. If I can find a much cheaper alternative for you, I'll put a link in the description below. It needs to be able to slip in between this washer-like flat surface here and the ear on the caliper. Get in there and hold that. Now the Ryobi P44 might be half the price of the Milwaukee, but you don't even have to invest in that if you want to do this job, because you could just simply use hand tools. But I will suggest that even if you don't use a swivel socket like these, use a 6-point socket, because you could damage the flats on these bolts, and these are a special bolt and they're hardened, and you can't just go grab a bolt from the hardware store to change these out. The fact that you can unlock the head and move it around on the Ryobi is an advantage over the Milwaukee, but the Ryobi is not nearly as powerful as the Milwaukee. Now these 14 millimeters that hold the bracket on, 14 millimeter, by the way, is the same as the 9/16, virtually the same. Getting an argument in the comments about how there's a tiny difference, because there is a tiny difference. I like to hook an extra wrench onto the end of the wrench. I can't get to this with the swivel socket or my ratchet, so I'm having to use a wrench. The bottom one, the top one, no problem. There's a socket in there. Add this wrench here, gives me leverage, and break that loose. And I can wrench it the rest of the way. I can even get a ratchet wrench in there, which is what I'm going to do. Now these are thicker. The actual bolt is thicker, even though the head is still a 14 or 9/16. The threads are thicker for the bolts that go to the bracket. Caliper requires a special tool like this to push the caliper piston back into the bore while spinning it. You'll see me do that in a minute. Always leave one side together. Never take both sides of the brakes apart at the same time, because if you ever forget where something goes, you can always look at the other side if you haven't taken it apart. So I like to do one side start to finish before doing the other side. You think I remember by now exactly how brakes go, and I do, but that wasn't always the case. Now we need a little vibration. Get this rotor off. Provided by PFH. Now, normally if you're going to cut the rotors and put them back on, you want to look for these history marks, which this one happens to have one in every spot. Usually they'll have 2 or 3 of these holes, not 5. So you want to know where the history marks are. Clean off the inside of the rotor, clean off the hub, and then try to put it back where the history marks are the same spot that they were, so you don't have rotor pulsation. We're putting new rotors on here. Before getting the hub off, there's a connector for the anti-lock brake sensor. And on the bottom here, I don't know why they put it on the bottom, I guess to make it the hardest to get to as possible. There's the little pinch release. So you got to pull up from the bottom to pinch that thing and get it off. And it wasn't so terrible. Let's turn it over where you can see it. See the pinch release right here? Pinch that. Pinch it to the outside, and then that part on the inside lifts up and releases. So now the hub can come out. This is also 14 millimeters. fuel, you make short work of these. Be careful if you're looking for a Milwaukee fuel like this and you're looking through cheaper variations of it, because this is the high torque with the hog ring, and they have one with a pin here that is annoying as can be. It's unbelievably annoying, and it's a little bit cheaper than the one with the hog ring. And they also have a low torque version of this, which is cheaper. So if you're not using the link that I have in the description of the video, be careful of what you click on. And there's what the bolts look like to hold the hub. Nope, didn't need the BFH for that. You do need to get the backing plate off here without it getting bent. Wipe this down so none of that trash gets in between the hub and the suspension. While you've got access, you want to look at things like this bushing, because if that bushing goes bad, your alignment goes out for your rear. This swing arm goes all the way across. There's another bushing over there. And that bushing gets a lot of work as this goes up and down. But you just got a spring here and a shock here. Look, make sure no trash has fell on your brand new hub. Don't want any to get in there. I like to always get started every single bolt in a set before I tighten a single one of them down. That way we don't have a situation where the last one you're having a hard time lining it up. They'll all line up nicely because they're all loose. I didn't hammer down on that a lot with the Milwaukee because I want to feel how tight they are. There we go. And you're going to need Loctite for the bolts. My drain bucket for the fluid. 10 millimeter to take the bleeder loose. Want the fluid to escape and go into a drain bucket, because if we force that fluid back up through the hose into the system, we could damage the anti-lock brake system or the brake master cylinder. Neither one of which we want to buy. want the tool with the little divots and the reliefs on the piston. And then I want this backed off to where the space is taken up. Then to work the tool, got a 19 millimeter and a 21. The 19 goes here, make it like a handle. 21 here, like a handle. I'm choked up on the wrench because I don't want to put a lot of pressure on this. I want it just snug. And then turn. And the handbrake needs, the parking brake needs to be in the off position while doing this. You see some of the brake fluid coming out? That's because when I turn this and turn that piston, the piston went in a little bit and forced some of that brake fluid that's behind it out. Now we got a little slack here again, which means I've got to back this off a little bit to take up the slack. Again, I'm just using fingertips. I'm choked up on the wrench so that I don't want to put any real pressure on this. I just want to take up the slack. Once the slack is taken up, then I can turn this in a little bit more. The fluid coming out. Repeat the process. Okay, the last bit, hold on to that pressure and close the brake bleeder. And then relax. You don't want it to pull any air into the system. When you're sure the piston's lined up where it will accept the brake pad correctly, and it's had a chance to sit in there and relax, I'm going to open the bleeder one more time and let it sit there a little bit and watch for air bubbles. Keep it nice and still, watching for air bubbles. This is called gravity bleeding. Just letting gravity pull the fluid down through here. And since the bleeder is near the top, the bubbles will come up to the top and come out the bleeder. Now on this particular system, if you were to turn the car on and put slight pressure on the brake pedal while this is open, the anti-lock brake system will actually force fluid out of here for you and any air that's in here. But it's going to be coming out quickly, and you quickly deplete what's in your master cylinder reservoir. So you want to be very careful if you're doing that. We want the shiny new rust-free hub to remain shiny new rust-free hub. So a little bit of this anti-seize, not that hair, and rub it on here. We have a very thin layer of it between, especially here on the hub part, very thin layer between it and the new brake rotor. Tiny bit on the threads. It sounds like there's a jet in the background sometimes because there is. All right, get the excess off of here. Paper towel, because just enough to be rust proofing. Don't want enough to make the rotor ride off center. It's weird. You just put it on there. Why are you taking it off? Well, I'm not taking all of it off. Very thin layer of anti-seize on there. Oh, yeah. Inboard pad, the wear sensor is at the bottom of the inboard pad. Okay, one thing you want to look at on pads to get a kind of an idea of the condition of the caliper and the caliper pins is there even wear? Both of these look like they're almost exactly the same amount of wear. This looks like it's a little thicker over here and thinner over here. Can you see that? Thicker here, thinner here. That means that one of the pins is probably sticking more than the other. So take them both out and clean them. Need to do that anyway. All right. Got a line right there for the top pin. Line right there. They look the same, don't they? The top and bottom pin look virtually the same. Sometimes they're a little bit different. Got to look at that. Doesn't matter, carb cleaner, PV blaster, WD-40, whatever you want to do. Get it in here. Clean these out, but don't put an engine oil based fluid in here because it could ruin the rubber. I also like to take, once I put the stuff in there, take the pin and put it down in there and twist it and move it around, kind of break that stuff loose, and then dump it out in my drain over there and repeat several times. So I'm going to go do that now. Oh, look how easy that moves now. Remember we were looking before in the wear indicator, the squealer was at the bottom in the inboard pad. These pads go down, push against the springs, and just kind of roll it in there. Same thing out here, down, this bottom edge touching the rotor. Compress these little springs and roll it in there. Remember, we've got this opening here. We'll go inside with that little notch on the inner pad. Since I've already put Loctite on the bolt right in there, you got to use the thin wrench again. You try to use a regular wrench, which will fit in there now. And when you tighten this 14 millimeter bolt, it's going to trap it in there. And that one's tight. And we think we're done, but we're not. We're not done. Is if I have to go inside the vehicle and pump the brake pedal several times to get that piston to come out and close the gap. Otherwise, you could set the vehicle on the ground and you could take off and have no brakes until you pump the pedal up. You're already in motion. Because this has anti-lock brakes, what I'm going to do first is turn the car on, put slight pressure on the brake pedal, and hold that for a little while because I know it's going to pump fluid back here. And that gives it at least a little bit of pressure. And then I'll pump the brake pedal. And I want y'all to have a really good view of the caliper. I immediately got an ABS light. Guess what I forgot? I forgot to plug in this wheel speed sensor. Okay, that piston seemed to have come out really well. Now, could y'all see the arm move when I applied the parking brake? I applied it 3 times and let it off 3 times while I was pumping the pedal to make sure that the piston could come all the way out as far as it needed to take up any slack between the caliper, the pads, and the rotor. And these have a shoulder. You need to get one down in there, getting the wheel into position so that the wheel doesn't get damaged. All the way in there. Now, it'll be a lot easier to line these other ones up. Put that one in there. star pattern I use. Hey, if you like this video, we got a whole lot more. We got tool reviews, we've got repair videos, we've got show car videos, hot rods, mod rods, you name it. If it's got wheels on it and an engine, it's probably on this channel. So subscribe, like, and binge watch Saneauto. Binge watch Saneauto. November 21st, 2022. This is the blue 2010 Prius, 395,361 miles. Just completed both rear hub bearings. And previously this week, did rear brakes with both new rotors and ceramic pads. Front brakes with both new rotors and ceramic pads. At this time, it has been averaging 42.4 miles per gallon for over 1,000 miles.